But we appreciate that. Massey, we're hopping into the new coaches, and one particular we want to talk about today. We'll get into a few other ones, but Marcus Satterfield, South Carolina OC and QB. What did you find out about his tendencies, and break it down for us?
Well, I watched a couple of eras of his coaching, and one was back when he was in Temple. Specifically, I looked at that last year, which I believe was 2015, and then he'd gone somewhere else. And then I looked at those last two games, those couple of wins that South Carolina had this year against Tennessee and Clemson, I believe.
Correct.
And so I'll start with 2015. And Raph, I want to ask you a question as I describe this, but what it looked like to me was sort of the Scott Frost UCF offense, where they had that great trigger man, and that QB at UCF was able to adapt, move very quickly, make very quick decisions, a lot of ball fakes, looking backside to a receiver, running a slant. It looked a lot like that. And the question I have, so a lot of times, Huskers, we always harken back to the day of, you just turn out and you hand it off to LP or whoever, and it all works, right? But the curious thing to me about the RPO is that if you're coaching a team like Temple and you're playing Penn State, you're not going to line it up, right? 5 across,
right,
and just do nothing but run power, because you can't do that, especially with the D line that the Nittany Lions had back then. So they ran a lot of that RPO action, in addition to the fact that, with the rules being different in college and pro, those linemen can move downfield, which tells the defense a lot of times that it's a pass, even though they're going to run the ball, and vice versa, right? That you can have your lineman downfield on a pass play, which confuses the linebackers and the safeties. And so I understand why they run that. Now, what changed, I think, from then until this year, that I watched was about Satterfield, was it looked more like a little more pro concepts in the passing game. And I'll tell you what, Hatfield and I were watching it, and Scotty and I were watching it, and of course they have Rattler as their quarterback. And that guy is not afraid to throw into double coverage, I'll tell you that much. But he has a gun, and he had great receivers. So I think what Satterfield was doing was adapting to what he had. So he has a quarterback that can throw the ball downfield fairly accurately, and he had receivers that could go up and get it. And so, what I was expecting to see was, okay, we're going to see some dual blocking and some counter stuff, but that's not the offense he inherited, and it's not the one he's running. And so I guess my question, this is a football question, right, Raph?
That's right.
Is why?
Oh gosh,
Raph, we were on a good roll, man. We were having a good roll. We were having a good
You
roll.
must be out of your damn mind.
It's disrespectful to Massey. It's
anytime he
disrespectful
says
to
that
the
"let's
listeners.
ride" stuff, we blow him out. We
What
won't hear.
was that, AD? I missed that.
Anytime he hears that "let's ride" stuff,
Nice.
No, yeah. That word, whatever it is, we don't want to give that. Go ahead, where you're at, Massey.
I don't even know if I should direct my question to Raph.
Yeah,
he seems distracted, delusions.
No, you got me talking offense. I started thinking back to the days of John.
Well, there ain't no offense in this this different team. I'm gonna tell you that right now. None.
So if the equalizer right now, and one of the Saban used to complain about the RPO, right? Because offensive linemen could be down the field on a pass play, 3 yards, and it would be confusing. Is I think a lot of offensive coordinators are very enamored of that, right? Because it is an advantage. And so I didn't find what I was looking for. I was expecting a little more power game, but the SEC is really not played that way anymore.
Right.
I mean, it is really a quarterback-centric offense, and he's got Spencer Rattler. My question is going to be, what do you do when you come here next year and maybe we don't have Casey, and we're looking at a transfer quarterback? Do you think, Raph, that he is going to be able to kind of transition a little bit more to some counters, some traps, some ISOs? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think so. The reason why I think that is one of the things that you heard a lot when Matt Rule was hired is that he's very kind of a chameleon. He adapts to the players he has. Like when he was at Temple, there was some times at Temple. I don't know if Satterfield was there when at points, but he talked about at the press conference how they'd go with 3 tight ends and they'd go with the fullback and they'd run some power football because that was what the players he had. But then when he went down to Baylor, then he had more receivers, so they were more 5 wide and they were more spreading it out. So what he's going to do, I've got to believe with Nebraska next year, he's going to come in, see where we're sitting at. If Casey decides to come back, I would assume that it'll be more of probably that Spencer Rattler offense that you watched with South Carolina. However, maybe Casey does not come back, and I'll say it. I've continued to say this from the get-go. You always hear about NFL. If you have a great quarterback in the NFL, there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to be a really good football team. Unlike one team, I will not mention them right now. I don't know what's going on with that. I won't mention them.
Yeah, that was a great contract.
There you go.
Way to give up all your
exactly all your assets.
We're not talking about him.
And I think it's important to mention that when you look at the potential RPO type of offense that Nebraska may run next year, it's extremely important, Casey Thompson's decision. Extremely important, because you either go and get a transfer portal quarterback that's new to Nebraska, and obviously there's going to be a lot of new things next season. Mm-hmm. And so if you're able to keep a guy like Casey Thompson, who nonetheless is your quarterback, it's extremely important when you have an experienced guy under center or in the shotgun, whatever you want to say, as the signal caller, because he's experienced, he's been there, he's been at Nebraska specifically. And I'm not questioning Casey Thompson's ability to make decisions on the fly. I mean, you guys know this. RPO, you're making a split-second decision based on the defense mid-play. A lot of pre-snap movement. Casey's already been watching film on Matt Rule, and I feel like that door has begun to sway open a little bit more on the idea that Casey Thompson returns. Yeah. So I think there's it's extremely important, Casey's decision, because that's one thing that I don't think you have to worry about as much when all these other pieces are new and moving around.
The other thing I did see on the film is that he likes the H-back. So he had an H-back that would go in motion and then do some lead blocking. And I think that
and that'll be that.
I know you want the fullback, but that is a fullback.
That is a fullback. That's exactly like this past year. Like fullback, hey, that would have been great or whatever, but even just an H-back, something to give that back an extra blocker going up through those holes. Because what was happening a lot this year was Grant, for instance, he touched the ball and he'd already have somebody on him. At least if you had had an H-back, at least giving him one chance to, get a read.
And that was crazy about Anthony Grant is like, you kind of saw the evolution of him just kind of getting like, I don't want to say scared, but that's the one word I can only think of right now, is where you saw him at the beginning of the year. It was north-south everything. It was physical, tough run for Anthony Grant against North Dakota, against Georgia Southern, against Indiana. But then you slowly started to see him where he continued to get met immediately in the backfield. And that's when the east to west kind of stuff happened. And that's when he had to start dancing around. And it was like you wanted to blame Anthony Grant, but you also saw how the offensive line was performing. And it was like you got a running back that's skittish, or that's skittish in the backfield and nervous to just go straight into a pile when his offensive line hasn't been able to be relied upon to block for any significant amount of time.
Yeah, he's got to make 2 cuts sometimes before he gets to the line of scrimmage. And so when you get the ball, that's your mentality, right? Who do I have to miss before I get into the line?
Massey, do you think with that type of offense you see, this might sound like a foolish question in light of the performance this year at many times. How does he run that offense with the offensive line we currently have?
Well, I think I'd reverse it a little bit. How do you run a power game without having run blockers? Right? So these guys were recruited to take up space, to be long, to keep guys off the quarterback for 2.5, 3 seconds, right? They were not, I don't believe, recruited to do dual blocking and counter and pulling and getting out in space. That is not their gig. And so what I suspect we'll see is sort of a transition period where you're going to have to run some of those RPO concepts, right? Well, you should always run RPO concepts in college football because it's so advantageous to the offense to do so. But I think you're going to see a transition, and it also depends on who the quarterback is. If Casey leaves and Spencer comes, you're going to see a lot of throws down the field. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. That to me is going to be the key piece. Who's going to be your quarterback?
Yep.
That's why I think it's going to be imperative to find out what Casey's plans are going to be, and we'll hop more in that in a bit. But man, so goes that offense. So goes KC's decision. So goes that offense. According to what we have. Obviously, I'm not talking about who comes in, but I'm saying what we have on the roster right now. You know.
Oh yeah, and I could going back to the whole NFL thing. You have a great quarterback, you good. College football is the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.